So I'm Brad Levitt, president of AFT Construction, and today we have Jack Hanks with us. So welcome, Jack.
Hey, good to be here, man. Thanks for the invite. We're excited to talk about what we do. So,
Yeah, one thing we've never broached, and just a little background, Jack is the president and CEO of Velocity Public Adjusting, and we've never really gone down the road in depth as far as, insurance, public adjusting, claims, even from the workers' comp, which is not really what we're going to talk about today, or like the general contracting side. But I think for those listening, just to kick this off, to give a little background before we dive into the meat of this, Jack, public adjusting, what is that?
so yeah, nobody knows about us until they need us, right? It's one of those things.
Right?
So, as a public
That's typically
adjuster,
how it goes.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're a licensed adjusting firm. So our job is to represent the insured to ensure that we give them a level playing field when they have an insurance claim. We represent property owners that have a claim, and our job is to basically come in and assess the claim, read the policy, make sure all the everything's in a proper bucket, and then submit the claim on behalf of the insured to the insurance company, then negotiate in good faith to get a proper settlement. And that's there's about 8,000 steps in between that. But yeah.
So walk us through that as far as, the public adjusting side. So to put this in context, typically, let's say I'm a homeowner, I have my house,
Yep.
there's a water leak, right? Ice maker leaks. Maybe, I live in a multifamily unit, or even if it's my personal house with a basement, catastrophic damage with water. So a lot of times what'll happen is, okay, I have the issue, I have insurance for a reason. I contact my insurance policy, and they send someone out, which isn't you, right? They send someone out that's going to give, for lack of a better word, they're going to lowball me, right? They're going to say,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to get, this, here's our database that we're going on
Yeah.
values, and here's the price, and here's your check. Sign here, get your check, go
Yep.
figure it out.
Yep.
And then, so how does that work from your side? I mean, we're the liaison, or the value you're bringing to the client. How do you come into play with this?
So what we always compare this to, I mean, it's like hiring a CPA to do your taxes, right? So the last thing when, like, you're in business, right, your CPA does your taxes, so you give them all your receipts, all your information, they diagnose it, go through it, and then they tell the IRS what you owe in taxes. It's the same thing for us. So if you think about it logically, the last thing you'd want to do is give the entity you're paying your premium to every month the power to come in and tell you what they're going to pay for the claim. It makes zero, if you think about it logically in a business sense, it makes no sense whatsoever. But however, that's the way the business is formed, is developed that way. So they're controlling the output of the money and the input of the money at the same time the carrier does. And that's not really what insurance is for. Insurance is to indemnify you, so when you have a loss, they put you back whole as you were the day before the loss happened. So, adjusters, they go out and they write a scope of damage, what they feel is necessary and deemed to be what the loss value is worth. And as well as I do, and you build custom homes, right? This stuff,
Yeah.
number one, with supply chain issues anymore, and lack of materials and labor through the roof and things like that. It's just not really they don't really do their due diligence to get the claim done right. So our job is very easily to come in and get the claim done correctly and submit that to the carrier. We, like I tell our clients, our only job is to get the claim right, whether it's $1 or $1 million or 5,000, whatever the number is the number. The scope of damages has to be accurate, and that's our job, is to put this all together like a CPA does on your taxes to represent the insured to make sure they're getting a fair shake. So people have the checkbooks, don't want to write those big checks out all the time. So we come in to kind of just make sure everybody's playing fairly and getting taken care of. So it's
It's
quite
such
challenging.
Yeah, it's such a good analogy, because when you bring up the CPA side, our tax code is very complex, right? And it's different for everybody, and there's so many
Yep.
ins and outs, and the reality is there's a lot of things that, by having someone that's experienced, that understands the tax code that's changing, they can help us diagnose, on a personal level. And the same thing for you, Jack, is that uh, this is a conversation I wish I had years ago. I'm like, where's Jack in my life, 5 years ago? Because we've dealt with this on the client side. And,
Oh, I'm sure.
I've had clients, yeah, like we had an experience where downtown Phoenix, multifamily clients in Europe, their cat, had turned the faucet on, floods a house,
Ooh.
nothing to do with us. But long story short, it's catastrophic damage, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, as we're working through the insurance company, same thing, there's, you don't want to say there's bias, but the reality is, they're
Well,
working off an index. Yeah, an index in the market that they come out, and the client comes to me and says they're going to give me this money? And I'm looking at this like, there's no way. Like, this is all custom finishes, metallic paint. Like, I can't do this for that amount.
So, keep what I tell all my clients. Insurance companies are a for-profit organization. There's a reason why they own a bunch of real estate, and they have Chris Paul, Aaron Rodgers on TV for 15 seconds, right? That's all.
And Patrick Mahomes, they're
And
not
all those
cheap.
guys,
Yeah.
right? They're paying
Yeah.
big money for that. So insurance companies have become more of a marketing agency anymore than they are really insurance companies, unfortunately. And it's changing, and I get it. I mean, if you're the CEO of Allstate or American Family, your ultimate job at the end of the day is to be profitable, to make sure your shareholders are getting their profit margins hit and they're getting those dividend checks. And the people who suffer because of that, unfortunately, are the policyholders, because they're the ones that are paying the price on either not getting covered in full or getting denied outright. So it's difficult. And like you said, too, insurance company, we all use what's called Xactimate. I'm sure you've seen it. It's an estimating software.
Yep.
But keep in mind, that's geared if you're doing 15 track houses in a row in the same block, all at the same time. That's where those numbers come from. And builders like yourself, and you're getting these extravagant and high-end finishes, nowhere in heck does Xactimate have that line item. So, we rely heavily on our business partners like custom home builders and commercial builders to give us the real number, because that's the real number. Whatever, as long as the loss is covered, the value is the value is the value. And it's really, you guys are the experts on that, not us. We're policy guys. Our job is to get the coverage established, to make sure each bucket of coverage is appropriate and put in the right spot. I let guys like you tell me what the actual number is for the chandelier that came over from Turkey, 15 years ago. That's
Yeah.
the hard part, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And to that point, Jack, what's interesting is when you look at the complex society that we're dealing in now with pricing, I mean, we know that
Yeah.
with freight, fuel,
Oh,
availability, product. And so the thing is, yeah, something that may have been priced 2 years ago, they're working off
yep.
the index or Xactimate, as you mentioned, that it's different now. So you have to have current market pricing that's going to value, so the client's not upside down and having to fork out of their own pocket even more.
Well, for instance, I have we do work. We're in 38 states, all over the country. We settled a claim last October in Rockford, Illinois. Well, if you've ever been in the Midwest, from about October 15th about now, you can't work because snow, ice, cold, right? It's a big, huge factory. They didn't want to shut it
Yeah.
down. So the metal pricing, but from then till now, it's 34 or 38% higher than it was. So the contractor just provided everything's getting ready to get started next week, and his material cost rose that much. So I got to go. My job after this call today is to call my friendly insurance company and tell them that $1.8 million is, we appreciate that. However, I got to add a few $100,000 to this now, just because the materials in the last 6 months have gone up
Have
that
changed.
much. Yeah, and I have a really good friend who's the president of Ram Windows in Houston, Texas, and he was on our podcast yesterday, and we talked about it. His pricing, they don't even lock it in until the orders hit, because it changes between the oil and transportation. It changes almost by the, if not by the hour, by the day, right? So it's nonstop, and I'm sure you guys are feeling it as well. A tile roof square 5 years ago may have been $1,500. Now it could be $3,500 or $4,000, because there's so many variables involved. And once again, the insurance company needs to be aware of that, because if you have a covered loss, whatever the number is the number. They try to control what they're going to pay, right? Just because that's a standard. There's no such thing as standard in insurance loss. I'm sorry, there's not. Everybody's circumstances are
Yeah.
different. Is it on the
Yeah,
fourth
exactly.
floor? Is it access? There's a million issues involved. So,
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, just how it relates to lumber, to windows, to
mm,
steel, metal, PVC. I mean, all these things are fluid, and it's the same thing in my business. Whether you're operating at a GMP or cost plus. I mean, we're a cost plus contractor, but we have to really communicate with the clients. Just, hey, here's what we're tracking. Here's the line items. Here's where we're going.
yeah.
Can we order stuff now? Can we store it? Can we warehouse it? And so it's a very fluid, especially on these projects that we have that could be 1-2 years in design and then 1-2 years of build. I mean, these are long processes, and it's the same thing for you. I mean, look, I've been through the insurance process, not myself, but clients have. And Jack, I mean, you could speak to this, that, when someone makes an insurance claim, it's not like they have a check in like 2 weeks. I mean, this could be 6-7 months you're
Oh,
fighting with them.
so yeah. I mean, not to scare anyone, but I still have claims from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico in litigation from 3.5 years ago. So, it's just, there's an old thing called delay, deny, defend, right? That's the insurance company's philosophy on paying claims. So unfortunately, a lot of their, not all, a lot of their philosophies are if they can underpay a claim, delay it as long as possible. People get frustrated, angry, and wear out, and they just call it a
And they'll
day,
just take the check.
just settle and be done, right?
Hmm.
Now, ethically and morally, is that all right? I don't. It's not for me to judge. However, but yeah, insurance. We tell all our clients, especially on a commercial claim, it's going to be a year. By the time the claim happened, we get involved, and the property gets rebuilt. It could be, and typically is a year. I mean, we're doing a lot of work in New Orleans from Hurricane Ida, and right now we are just in the middle of we're 2/3 the way home on most of these, right? And we still have some bigger projects that are 400 or 500 grand still trying to fight for, millions of dollars fighting for, because it's such a, and keep in mind there's laws and statutes involved as well. And our job is to make sure these laws and statutes are being adhered to by the carrier, which they are. But at the same time, everything has a 30-day or a 60-day mark. You're still talking months just to get to a certain point before the check even gets written, and then still fighting for more and more and more. Then they got to go and get the permit, get the thing built, and then it's a whole process. So it does take time. Patience is a big, huge thing for the clients. I tell them after my first conversations, I hope you guys like to drink a lot of wine because you're going to need it. Because the next 12 months, it's gut wrenching, man. It really, really is. Especially if you have families. I mean, think about if you have a hurricane or a fire, and you go home and all your stuff is gone, you have nowhere to go. You literally have to take your family, move them to a different location, and readjust all your life. Our different gyms, sometimes a different school. Sometimes you have to drive your kids 40 minutes one way, or it's just a million factors involved. The emotional toll it takes on families, especially, is difficult. So, so last December we had our L10 EOS meeting. That our new thing for this year is we really want to be more empathetic to our clients, because as anyone, we get it's a business for us, right? So we get a claim in, it's a hurricane claim or a fire, and very methodically we approach it and get it through. But we lose we lose the fact sometimes that these families have lost photo albums, wedding dresses, their kids' clothes, their baby shoes. That stuff could be all gone in a heartbeat. And it takes them. I mean, we can get all the money in the world for that, but you can never replace some of that stuff. And I think as an industry, we all need to do a lot better with that, empathizing with the clients, because you just imagine going home tonight and your stuff's just obliterated, right? And no money, an amount of money in the world is going to get that back. So it's a very emotional, draining, and then add the fact that it's going to go on for a year and you have to fight for every nickel. So you can just imagine the toll it takes internally and emotionally and physically as well on the clients.
That's great perspective, Jack. You think about, I think in any line of business, that ability to be empathetic and understand, put yourself in the client's shoes, right? A lot of times, when I related and I talked to my team just on a communication side, it's very easy, and I'll give like our analogy. It's very easy for me as, we're dealing with big numbers, big projects, big orders. So you see a change order cost, $300, $800, to us, it's just like, okay, cost of doing business, here it goes. But when you really think about it, if this was coming out of my pocket, okay, am I really evaluating this? Am I the liaison
Right.
for the consumer? Am I really paying attention to be empathetic on, okay, this project's taking a little bit longer than it normally is? And yeah, as you mentioned, they're displaced. And as it relates to insurance, to your point, Jack, that, hey, there could be artwork damage, furniture. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a lot more than just the house damage. And then now they have personal belongings, they're displaced. And so now it's a year waiting for insurance, and then you still
Oh,
got to wait for 6 months to a year for the bill to be recompleted. And so this takes a toll on people, and they still have their lives, they still have
yeah.
work, and it's like we have to do our best part to like put that together and help them through it.
Yeah, 100%. It's a daily reminder we have to do that, because it's our business is to adjust claims, and we do so many that it's hard. Like I'll go into a Category 5 hurricane, and I've done I think 19 hurricanes now, so I'm used to the debit. I mean, I know this sounds. I'm used to it, right? I'm used to
Yeah.
having buildings on the ground and no food, no water, and no electricity, and that's part of our thing. So. I've been preaching this on our podcast, when I talk in front of other PAs and roofers and contractors. We really need to work on that, just because it's an emotional. I mean, divorces, and there's just so many things that go involved, because people get their rear ends kicked in, and the insurance company doesn't really they don't care because it's a business
They're
for
not
them.
sensitive to it.
Right.
Yeah,
No.
it's a numbers thing. As you mentioned, they're shareholders. They're looking at it. They're looking at a sheet.
Yeah, and then their adjusters sitting in a cubicle in Omaha, Nebraska, 800 miles away from the loss, and they can pick and choose what emails they want to review and look at that day, and it's tough, man. So it's we really really need to do, all of us, a better job in my whole industry to be more empathetic, and we try, but we fail a lot. I'm not going to kid you. That's probably the hardest part for us, is becoming just get emotionally attached to these things, because it is draining. I have a lady right now texting me with a house fire that we're working on, and she goes, "I just called you 3 times. It's been 4 minutes, and I got 3 phone calls from the same person because she's got something going on. She needs to talk to me right away." And it's just it's because her house is burned down, right? So I get it. So it's hard, but at the same time, we have families and lives too, so we have to find that delicate balance of all this, and it's difficult, man. It's a rewarding job when that check finally comes and the people get to move home, but man, it's a dogfight. It really is, all the way through. So
Yeah, it's interesting speaking through this because our businesses are so similar, and as you mentioned, I mean, it's so hard, but just that ability to connect with our clients and communicate with them and understand them and at least listen to them, and
yes,
it's such a part to be successful with any business. But going back to the insurance side, Jack, I mean, one thing is, we were early in the conversation speaking about just the claims and the complexity of it. One thing that it took me a while to understand was line of sight, right? And
yeah,
you could explain this a lot, where hey, they may damage, the cabinetry in the kitchen from a water leak, but they may have matching cabinetry in the great room, the millwork throughout. And the issue is you can't match that. And then this was done maybe 10 years ago. And so walk through line of sight and how it's not just the claim of the kitchen, but how that expands
yeah.
to maybe a room or home.
So the weird part to this. Every state has different rules and regulations of this. There's several states that have matching laws where if 2 or 3 shingles or 1 cabinet is damaged, the state statute is the insurance company owes for all of it, period. And there's 4 or 5, 6 states like that. Several states, like the weird part about Arizona, which we reside in as well, it's neither a matching state nor a non-matching state. There's no law. There's no law either way. So it's a little bit of a free for all, and I'd much rather have it that way than a non-matching state. So when the line is sight, so basically, if you have cabinetry that got damaged in a water loss, and the hard part is they want to pay for the lowers only, not the uppers, and then you have a family entertainment center, basically in a great room that's the same color cabinetry, the same material, built the same time, and you put these 2022 cabinets in. Well, now those don't match. So once again, in the state statute, it doesn't call either way to get that done. So we have to be very creative and very diligent how we approach that and explain. We have to get manufacturer specs and bring builders like you guys in, and we basically have to lay out the game plan of why they owe for this. So it's and without representation of a public adjuster or an attorney, 99.999% of the time the carrier is only going to pay for that damaged lower area, right? So that's why it's so important to get people on your side to fight for this stuff, because you know as well as I do, what's a kitchen cost now? $100,000, right?
Yeah. Easy.
You get a check for 15, 20,000, and what's the other 80 coming from, right? So that gets difficult, and most people don't know what they don't know. So they get the check for 15,000 and like, I guess I got to figure this out, and they'll do a mix match or this, that, or the other thing, and they go to sell their home, and the realtor's like, well, we got to take $100,000 off your MLS listing because you have a cabinet issue here. So it's you get one shot to do a claim, okay?
Yeah.
And that's it. And once you go past the statute of limitations and you accept that and you sign off on that check, you damn well better be right, because there's no going back, unfortunately. So that's the difficult part. So the matching is a big thing. We get claim after claim after claim. Like, the wood flooring, they only pay for the wood floor in the family room, but yet it goes all the way through the house, and it's all attached, and there's no doorways. So the rule of thumb is if there's a doorway and it stops, that's where that matching issue stops, which I understand. But, like most houses, I'm sure you build the great rooms, and they all attach, and there's stairwells and down the hallways. And, 1,500 square feet of flooring becomes 10,000 square feet of flooring very quickly. And the insurance company only wants to see the 1,500 square feet. They don't want to see the other 8,000 that they owe for, because the number goes up, right? But once again, that's what the insured is doing, and that's what they're owed. And our job is to get them to that point where they see the light and that check is written. And as you can imagine, it's about 18, 20 emails, 33 letters, and 3 on-site inspections before they can see the light. So it's a process.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. So speak to this because I think is there any risk for the client? Because I was going to ask you what's the benefit of hiring a public adjuster, right? But a public advisor. I mean, you already answered this. It's like, we already know the strategy of the insurance company.
Yeah.
We already know line of sight. I mean, all these things that can really impact them. So having you on their side as that fight for them, it's going to help. Now, is there any concern from the client side that, hey, if the insurance company's paying me 25,000, but I hire Jack and I end up getting 125, which really covers costs, does that affect my future premiums? Is that an issue or black mark on me? How does that work on the payout side? Can that affect me in the long run?
So we get that question a lot. So here's the thing: the way it's supposed to work. So if you have a claim, you have a claim, you have a claim, whether it's 500 or 1,000 or a million. So once you're in that algorithm for the carrier, the underwriting department looks at it, and we tell the clients, here's the thing: there is a chance you will get not because of our involvement, but if you have a claim,
Yeah.
you certainly may fall in the algorithm where you're no longer going to be a good risk for them. So insurance companies look at all these things as risk. If you have $1 million home and your premium is $6,500 a year, and you're clean and it's well maintained, the chance of you having a claim is minimal, right? So they're going to keep you going. So if you do have a claim, accidents, which do happen, they're more likely going to keep you. But if you're a habitual, claim turner guy and you have an old roof with poor conditions, you may get canceled. We do a lot of big commercial work. I'm talking, $8, $9, $10 million claims, and these premiums we have one premium in Florida. It's $433,000 a year. Okay, and we're doing a claim that's probably $6 million, and they're all worried about getting canceled. I'm like, there's no way they're going to cancel you because they like that $500,000 a year. And here's the thing: and I literally do the math for them. So let's say their premium is it's 10 grand a year, and it's a $300,000 water loss, and we go get them $300,000. And they have to go to a different insurance company for 2 years and pay 20% more on a premium. It's pennies on the dollar. It's an investment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you end up paying $7,500 a year for insurance instead of $6,500, but they gain $300,000. I'll do that all day as a businessman, right? I gladly pay the extra premium for 2-3 years to get that paid properly. So and they're not supposed to look at us and cancel premiums or raise rates because it's not about the number of the claim; it's about the risk of the claim. Does that make sense? They look at a $10,000 claim or $100,000 claim the same way. It's just about the amount of risk the carrier has on the property. Is this property going to be more susceptible now because of more hail, more water, more flooding, more fires, whatever? There's people up north where these fires keep happening. Their premium's going to keep going up because every year on the news, flags getting hit, Prescott's burning. So their premium is going to go up and up and up. Or they're going to start, another thing that can happen too, which is happening quite a bit, is they'll have exclusions. We have a bunch of work in California we do where there's wildfire exclusions. If your home gets burned by a wildfire, you don't have any coverage. Or they'll limit the payout of $15,000 to $20,000, whatever. Same thing on wind and hail. They'll have a huge deductible that the first $100,000 is your responsibility. So you're basically self-insuring part of your home. So there's all these factors that come into play. So we really, really, really encourage all our clients every year, man, read your policy, know what you have, understand it. Just because nobody reads their policy. I guarantee. Nobody does. We all hey, I need my insurance. Give me the cheapest.
What's the cheapest?
Boom. Every time. And there's horror stories because people don't read that stuff, so they don't know what they have coverage on, what they don't have coverage on. And it's always that thing you don't have that pops up, and it's horrible. The worst story I have, if we have a couple minutes here.
I do, yeah. Shoot.
We do a ton of hurricane work, tons and tons and tons. I have a client that owns hotels from North Carolina through Florida, Alabama, all the way to New Orleans. And before the hurricane, back in Lake Charles hit 3 years ago, calls me and goes, hey, I have 4 hotels. They're going to get pounded. Here's my policies. Or here's my policy. And he sent me one policy, and all the hotels except for one were listed. Okay? And I'm like, okay. I go, sir, I got your policy, but you're missing hotel X, Y, and Z on this road. He goes, Don't worry about it. It's the same policy. My cousin's a broker, and I gave him this particular property to write my new policy on. I don't have it yet, but I'm sure it's fine. Sign me up. Let's get going. So we sign a contract for each individual property, get them all going. Sure enough, Hurricane Sally comes rolling in there, destroys these hotels, rips the roof off. I mean, millions of dollars worth of damage. 3 of them like bam, bam, bam. We get coverage. We get going. The 4th one, it's wonky. I can't get a good answer from the new carrier. They're being evasive. They send an independent adjuster out. He goes, looks good to me. Keep going. Well, the roof gets tarped. They start the drying. About 3 weeks after the hurricane comes, the broker finally sends the policy to us. Guess what? Hurricane exclusion. Right in bold.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. His cousin, per his instructions, give me the best, cheapest policy you can. And the broker didn't tell him that hurricane in Louisiana is excluded. So this gentleman had a $2.5 million hurricane claim with no coverage on it. So you can imagine litigation involved in that just because the insured didn't read the policy when they bought it. And at the end of the day, it's buyer beware, right? Whatever we buy is what we buy. We're only owed for what is in that policy, and the best attorneys in the world, if you have an exclusion, it's zero. It's almost impossible to get that overturned. So we did get a little creative on this. We did bring the broker in, and we actually got the guy some money on that because our attorneys are very good. But we had to go after the broker through his E&O insurance, but the guy still is out of pocket $1 million or $2 million because of having a crummy insurance policy, and he saved $5,000 a year, maybe. Not worth it, right? Yeah. So insurance, it's a pain in the butt, but we all have to have it. Life insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance, and if you don't, it's that minute every time it nips you in the bud. When you don't have is when you get hit on something, and it's like Murphy's Law. It's every time. It's sad, but nobody wants. I'm the same way. Hey man, when I get my new car, like I look at these premiums, like, but I can save $140 a month by not having phone coverage. And next thing I know, I need my freaking car towed. Here we go. I'm writing a check for $600. I'm like, that's on me, right?
Yeah, it's great advice because you had to understand. So it's really not the value of the claim. So whether it's 50,000 or 150,000, that doesn't matter if you've leveraged more because you read the policy and understanding it. It's more the risk side depending on location, risk, flood zone, fire zone, hurricane zone, or even maybe it's an old house or older construction. Or I mean, there's certain things that insurance companies can look at, which totally makes sense. But to your point, to read the policy, I mean, this is something I think for any of us, just understanding life and understanding, without going in the weeds, because I know this isn't either of our specialties, well, at least speaking for me, but like understanding car policies, house policies, as you mentioned, life insurance and how we set up, our personal indemnification so that we're not liable for every little thing. If we get in a car accident, do we go after our house, how we set up our estate, whatever. But to your point, Jack, what would you recommend for a client that's trying to figure out their policy to make sure that they don't have hurricane excluded? I mean, is there a resource for them? Does your firm offer that? I mean, where can they go to say, okay, Jack, I'm going to sign up for this policy. Is it good?
A great way to start is have a local PA review your policy. Have a local attorney review your policy, man, or even a broker. I mean, the problem with some agents anymore, a lot of the stuff is on our phones. The generic, like the Geicos and they're very generic carriers, so you don't get a lot of that. They're processing. They're not really like back old school. They're not really insurance agents or brokers anymore. So I really encourage everyone to find a go-to, an old school broker that can actually sit there and read the policy, go over with you, and have him explain. The biggest question is, what's excluded?
And counsel you.
Yeah, what's excluded? Like, what am I at risk for here? Because you can buy insurance on anything. It's like gambling. You can literally bet. You can bet on if Booker's going to hit the first 3 pointers tonight, right? Insurance. You can buy insurance on anything. You can raise your rate. You can raise your rate, lower your rate, buy down your deductible. There's a million options for that. You can insure your wife's wedding ring for more than what's in a normal policy. You can buy a rider for that. So, and people just don't do it, and it's so important. Back old school, everybody, not anymore, man. We're all too big in a hurry, but it can cost people hundreds, tens of thousands, millions of dollars if it's not done right. So find a good broker. They'll spend 30 minutes. That's all it takes. I mean, it's all black and white. Policies are there. You just got to read them, and you got to read the whole thing because they will give you something, take it away, and then put it back. You just got to be very diligent in what everyone has there. So spend 45 minutes, half an hour reading these things with your broker, with an adjuster or with an attorney, so you know exactly what you guys have. And spend a little bit more money to get it done right. I promise you, it's well worth it. And if not, it's the alternative is not fun.
It's funny, I'm smiling because I was just sitting with a client as it relates to me, and they were just in our office this week, and we're going through the bid on their home, and part of it because we're open book cost plus, right? So we have in our conference room, we have all the bid abstracts, and what that means is like we're going over excavation, right, and concrete, and so we have all the bids. And the client laughed because the disparity between the disparity between the three bids were, I mean, huge. I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking 40% difference between low and high numbers. And they're
Yeah.
like, how do you decipher this? But then as we go through the abstract, we're like, well, they excluded this, they
Yep.
included this. We're trying to assign a value so that we can get apples for apples. And I'm like, we've been doing this, it feels like our whole life as professionally for quite some time. And even as these bids come in and we're in the industry, like you're still trying to figure out, well, is there a bait and switch here? Are they missing something? Did they
Yep.
miss some of the scope? And we're trying to make sure that what we present to you is accurate so that we know the cost of your house. And how that relates to insurance is the same thing, is that having someone that you trust, like the broker, instead of just an online thing, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, Jack, is that we had a good insurance broker where it's very complex. And he sat down and said, look, Brad, here's A, B, and C policies, right, that were bid from these carriers, that he's brokering. Here's what you need to pay attention to. Here's where they're excluding hurricane. Here's where they're keeping it. Here's how this affects
Yep.
you. And then you can make the decision. But at least if you fully
Yeah.
understand what's in there, now you can evaluate that risk and say, okay, let's go with X, Y, or Z.
Yep. Yeah. The risk factor is important. What's your tolerance? I mean, a lot of us is it $1 million exposure or is it a $50 exposure? And that's what it is. You're basically picking your pain tolerance. So
Your pain
it is.
tolerance. It's so true.
It's exactly what it is, man.
Or like your friend example that, yeah, your pain tolerance, had he understood that, ideally he would have said, I need hurricane, because now he's dealing with
Oh,
this huge delta. And it's like, but had he had known, I'm sure he would have said, no, I need that hurricane
well,
policy for
he
5 grand.
assumed his cousin broker was going to take good care of him, and he took good care of him. All right, it's a nightmare. Then and keep in mind too, the work had already started.
Yeah.
So he's already writing checks
Ex-
to these contractors. So and they're uncomfortable at that point because like, oh my God, who's going to pay this bill here? So it's a big thing. Risk. That's what insurance is. It's assuming a certain tolerance of risk. Period. And everyone has a different level of that. And the really smart rich people have a very low risk tolerance and load up of insurance because they don't want to deal with it.
yeah.
Everyday Joe like you and I, we're the ones that we maybe take a little shortcut once in a while,
Yeah.
right?
We know what fuel costs and food costs, right? So we have to
Exactly.
be conscious of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So
So yeah. So you mentioned, Jack, that this could be a year process. I mean, kind of what are the steps? Are there certain steps? From inspection
yep.
to like how does that work through the process?
Well, first thing we do, once we get hired, we turn a letter of representation into the carrier. And at that point, that puts them on notice that our firm is on it. And they're instructed not to, all communication runs through our office. Everything. They don't call the insured. They don't email. They're not supposed to talk to the insured anymore because, unfortunately, it's like speeding. You're basically guilty until proven innocent when you have an insurance claim, right? So we make sure we frame the claim right and position all the evidence correctly. So what happened once we get the letter rep turned in, we have a documentation team come out and they go through the building with we have a 3D camera, drones, the whole 9 yards. We'll spend on a large loss days, if not weeks, looking at every window, every door, all the roof, all the siding, like what is actually what when the event took place, what actually got damaged from that event. Every screw, light fixture, light bulb is looked at because dollars, cents, pennies, nickels add up very quickly. At the same time, our office gets the actual, what we do too, which many people don't do, is we get the actual certified policy from the carrier. Because 99% of the time, the policy on your phone, that's a generic policy. That's not your real policy you paid for. And unfortunately, a word could be changed in that policy, and or but could affect the outcome of that policy dramatically. So my staff here in Scottsdale gets the certified policy, and they read it head to toe to make sure we know exactly what coverages are involved and what bucket. Because what we don't want to do is rob Peter to pay Paul on these certain insurance buckets to make sure that the ordinance of law bucket's being used properly, the content bucket, the other structure bucket, the additional living expense, business income. We make sure that all these things are appropriated so we do turn our submission form and we're not robbing a part of the policy to cover another part of the policy. We want to be very accurate, right? So once the documentation's done and all the submissions are done, my estimating team takes it, much like you guys put a house bid together. We package up an estimate of content, structure, business income, additional living expenses on what we feel the appropriate amount of loss is. Okay, in our best judgment, it's $1.3 million for all these things. Photo, and we provide all that with data, weather data, meteorology reports, all that stuff goes into these reports when we're ready. And then we have the insured sign a notarized proof of loss. And what that's stating is, Mr. Insurance Company, to best of my ability, I feel my loss is this. Here's my loss. Here's why it is. Here's all the facts to back it up. Please pay me this amount of money. Then we send that into the carrier, and after that, they have 30 days to respond. And usually about the 29th day at midnight, we get a response. And it's 9 times out of 10, it's never like, hey, great, here's your check.
Yeah.
It's always like, yeah, thank
okay,
you.
Let's negotiate. Yeah.
So, and what we do as a firm, and I've learned over the many years, is a lot of companies throw a bunch of fluff and miscellaneous crap in these estimates and submissions. And I can tell you, insurance companies are a lot smarter than we are. They know what's real and what's not real. If I go in and ask, $1,500 or $2,600 for this iPhone when it's really only $900, that's a red flag. Right. They're trained to look at red flags. So our job is to be completely accurate on every line item. We have to justify every line item and why. And that's what we do. And then the better job we do and load that gun up with the proper amount of bullets and ammunition, it just builds our defense better, and it builds a reputation to get it done correctly. At the same time, the carrier still is looking for a way out. And, our job is to just be fair and be accurate. And that's the negotiation is the toughest part of it all, because that can drag on for months and months and months, because the carrier were like, I'm going to give you $100,000. And I go, well, but it's 400. No, we have to go another 100. We have to keep going and going and going until the number's right. And that can drag on quite a bit. And at the end of the day, when we feel we have a good settlement, we'll go to the insured and say, look, here's where we're at. Here's what do you, and at the end of the day, it is their decision, right? Do you want to go forward and finish the claim off, or do you want to bring our litigation team in to go after even more for bad faith or whatever, which is very hard to prove. But at the same time, there is that we do have an obligation to present all the facts back to the insured and let them make the final decision. So it's a lot of crazy work, and our submission packages are thousands and thousands of pages sometimes. But once again, it's all about data and accuracy. So like you guys have a set of plans, it's the same thing. We're basically taking a set of plans, turning it into the carrier to justify the value. That's what we do. So.
Yeah, already speaking through this, the benefit, though, of bringing you in, Jack, is that essentially you're almost like legal representation, as you mentioned, that now all communication from the insurance company is going through you, not the client. And then just that evaluation, that diagnostic, right, as you're trying to understand the amount of damage. And then even more so, where you're going through their policy, find any ins and outs that the insurance may have, and then creating true valuations where there's no red flags. There's a ton of value. And then even if it escalates to litigation, which I'd imagine isn't all the time, but on occasion you may have to. It's about 8 to 10%
of the time our attorneys do get involved, because there's certain. So as a public adjuster, we can do everything an attorney can except for file a lawsuit. Okay, that's the only thing we can't do as a public adjusting firm. However, I do have many attorney partners around the country that we can bring in to do that part. And unfortunately, that's part of the business sometimes. Sometimes the carrier does act unfairly and unjustly, and we do need to bring our legal team in to finish it off. And I have some very strong partners, thank God, that aren't, or, if we set it up properly, it's a very easy case for them. We've never gone to trial, I can tell you that. We've gone to suit and litigation, but 9 times out of 10, the carriers their attorneys are sidebarring, oh crap, they got us here. We probably need to settle this. So there's a lot of
some kind of mediation.
Yeah. There's a lot of courtroom steps. We got in the day before trial and got a settlement on it, just because, once again, our job is to be right, and when we know we're right, we know we're right. We know we're right, right? And when you're right, there's no defense. That's the key, right? So we do a better job investigating the loss than the carrier does, because once again, they got a million claims and they're trying to just do what they can to do all of them, and our job is to get it right and get in there and fight and battle. So it's a crazy business some days. I go home some days and I'm just like, I feel like I'm in a boxing ring all day. It's nuts, right? So and enjoy. I
Yeah,
love it though.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
So without getting into specifics of pricing, I mean, just understand when you hire public adjusters, it is it a certain like percentage of total payout? Is it a set fee? Is it price dependent depending on the complexity of the project? Like maybe an hourly rate. I mean, how does that work? Just the different options there.
Well, it's contingency, so we only get paid on what we collect, and our fee depends on when we get involved. The perfect scenario for us is the minute the loss happens, we get a call and we get involved from day one. We control it that way. It's a much simpler, smoother process.
Very clean. Yeah.
Yeah, and our fee normally then is 10%. So whatever we collect, we get a 10% fee on. Now, the more complex claims where it's been open for 6 months and there's been 17 different things going on, and the hole's about 18 feet deep. Our fee goes up to, we call that new money. So we'll get a percentage, usually 20% of new money, because it's usually pretty much of a mess when we get, like, people think they can handle this on their own, like, oh, I got this, and then next thing you know, they got 17 denials on their email. Like, well, I tried to tell you. So
Yeah.
our fee goes up then because they dug such a hole, which is usually the biggest problem. Is sometimes the insureds don't know when not to talk. Like, you don't need to talk all the time. You can sit there and just say, I'm not sure, because the insurance company is going to put you in a corner. Like, oh, was this stain like that before the rain happened? I'm not sure. Well, to them, that's how it was. So we're taking that off, right? So
Yep.
that's why we have to be very diligent on what we say and don't say. But yeah, it's pure contingency. We only get paid as checks come in. So the cool part about us is you're never paying us until the money's there. We incur all those costs, all our experts, all our time, all our energy, until the check comes in. We don't see a nickel. We're sometimes it takes a year to get paid. And so we're floating several $1,000,000 at one time to make this thing work. But at the same time, when a check does come in, it's very worthy, and we feel really good about it. So,
Well, it's amazing, Jack. I mean, I'll kudos to you in this sense. I mean, to have 10%, I feel is beyond fair. And the reason I say this is because I personally haven't been through it with my loss, but I've had 3 clients go through this, and in all 3 cases, right? I mean, just to put this in perspective, one of them, the insurance company came at him at 210,000, and the actual loss was 800 grand. I mean, you're talking
yep.
4 times. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Second one, very similar. It came to him with 70 grand. It was like 350. The third one was like, 110, and it was 620. I mean, these are big, big numbers. And so for you saying, look, yeah, the insurance company's going to lowball you, but by bringing this up, I mean, there's so much upside for the client that it's really minimal compared to what the value you're bringing to the client.
You see it's very similar. It's always about 20-30% of what it should be. That's pretty much.
It's about 1/5. Yeah, it's pretty much about.
We did a study for IDA claims. I think it came out to be 28% was their first offer where we ended up with. Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and it's very consistent across the board. I don't know what goes on in those boardrooms behind closed doors, but there's a certain factor there that it's very similar every time is what we see. So, once again, and keep in mind, insurance, they're for profit, right? If they can get away with paying 110 grand, so
20%, yeah.
That's buyer beware, right? Know your rights, know what you can do, and to get it combated properly. But sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and that's the biggest thing about it is just educating the consumer to know what the heck's going on. And insurance companies typically are not your friend. They are there to make sure their entity are taken care of. That's tough. So, but yeah, underpaying claims is the norm, and it's more that way than the other way. I can promise you that, unfortunately.
So what's your background, Jack? I mean, have you always been in public adjusting? I mean, how did that transition in your career?
So I was a restoration contractor for over 20 years. I had an office in Scottsdale. We did work in California, Texas, Florida, and I was actually, ironically, a vendor for all the insurance companies. We'd go in and dry down hotels after a hurricane and put them all back together again. And the last 10 or 15 years, it got to be more difficult because their pricing, they would start structuring their pricing, and you have to buy materials here, and here's our guide to do this stuff. And it's like, so you're telling me I got
so much red tape.
Yeah, I had to hire people just to manage the programs we were on with no more. I mean, I was paying out of my own pocket just to manage the program because it was so intensive to upload this. I need 12 pictures of this and justify this. So we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the work, and it's been crazy. So it got to the point about 7, 8, 9 years ago. I'm like, man, I am getting tired of this. I mean, State Farm is running my business for me, really. They're giving me the work, telling me where to be, where to buy the stuff, how much they're going to pay me. And I sat back one day, I'm like, this makes no freaking sense because I'm the one carrying all the risk, right? I was the mailman was our best friend. I'm like, man, I'm stressing myself out over this. Like, hopefully the wire transfer goes in. You guys how it know. You got to get money to
Yeah.
pay your vendors, and ABC Roof doesn't care, Supply doesn't care if you got paid or not. You got to pay them for the roof tile. They don't.
Right. Right.
Plumber needs to
Yep.
get paid. He don't care. So I got to the point where my family was being affected. I was exhausted. I was getting angry, and I'm not sleeping, and it's insane. So I went to the point where I'm like, you know what? I think I can do this PA thing. I like the concept of it. I'm a big advocate to help people and to be on their side and David and Goliath story. I'm all about that. And I switched, and then my first day on the job, I signed a fire loss in Tucson, and here we are, several years later, 1,000 claims a year later, hundreds of $1 million in revenue later. We're doing it, man, and I feel it's a very important job we do, just because. Like I said, it's David versus Goliath, right? We're fighting an unfair fight, and when we do win, it's a really good feeling because Mrs. Smith is getting indemnified and getting paid fairly. That's the cool part of what we do. I love it.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, but that, to change careers and make that swap, 20 years in, I understand, the restoration side you're dealing,
Yeah.
You're being beat on from the insurance company and you're coming and doing, water repair, mold remediation, whatever it is, depending on the fire loss, whatever it is.
Yep.
But, how tough was it to transition to a new career and hit that reset button and then start a new company?
I mean, so back when I started doing restoration, PAs weren't even a thing because the carriers were much more amiable to get things done. We'd meet on the job, we'd go through it. They would literally go to their truck and have a checkbook and write a check. This was back in the early 90s, right? So it was a much simpler process. And then, it got to the point where that got harder and harder and harder. So it took me about a year to make my mind up to do it. I wish I would have done it sooner, but I didn't. And everything has a path. But I literally took off on this thing with my feet running. As I wound down my company, this thing took off like a house of fire. So it's probably the best business decision I've made since I've started doing this. But the transition was fairly smooth because, we did the same thing. We got a claim would come in, we go evaluate, write a scope of damages up, and then go build the thing. Well, the good part now is if the drywall is not there on a Tuesday, I don't have to worry about that. So it's been a blessing on that. I still have to hear about it, but then again, I don't have to worry about it. But that's a you problem, Brad, right? So yeah, so it's been a blessing, and I enjoy it thoroughly. I enjoy being a good guy on these things, and I mean, it's just a good feeling like some of these checks come. So the transition was fairly simple. I didn't understand it fully until I got going with how in depth these policies can be and how it's a chess game, and it takes a while to learn the chess game. Like sometimes we'll sit back and wait, let the carrier make the first move, right? Because you want to see what cards they're holding. If we start throwing all our cards down on day one, we don't want to jeopardize our insured that way. So I've learned the last 5-6 years to kind of weigh the other side. You got to read the room a little bit, see where they're coming from, and watch what they're doing, and because they know that we know that they know that we know, right? It's one of those things. Who blinks first? So we got to learn when to blink and when not to blink. That was the hardest part of this, but I think we've mastered it fairly well. When we're learning every day. Laws and statutes change every day. Every day there's something new in Florida going on, or a different statute in Georgia to worry about. So we have to keep up on all that stuff because we got to stay within the law and statutes as well. So we have I have one guy, all he does is read these bulletins and they come out and make sure our staff is not doing something stupid or the wrong thing. that doesn't go well usually. So
it's just amazing, like hearing this, because understanding, just like a CPA, as you mentioned, I mean, you're having to stay current, you having to understand this, diagnose everything, and the strategy behind it, as you mentioned, I mean, it's just like the power of negotiation, right? It's like, understanding your playing field, you don't want to, ace in the hole, you don't want to show everything yet, show all your cards, put it on the table. But as far as, the business, how has that grown from day one, from when you started to where you are now? I mean, what's that transformation?
Yeah, so I was basically, I worked for another PA when I first started. It was basically me trying to figure this thing out kind of by myself. So that was 6.5, 7 years ago. And now we're...
oh, that's it?
Yeah. This thing has taken off pretty... So Velocity, the company I own now, we're a year old this week.
Wow.
Yeah, we won PA of the Year this year already, and so I've been very blessed. I've my partner and our guys here and our staff is just they man, it's like one of those, when you build the Patriots and you got this thing. Our staff is just tremendous, and everybody here gets it, and that's a huge thing. We make mistakes every day and whatever, but we're not above
For sure.
fixing them and understanding them and doing our thing. But everybody stays in their lane very well, and they're all striving to be better every day and helping the insured. So, our first year we've done over 650 claims in 1 year. 38 states, tens and hundreds of $1 million in claims settled already. But yeah, it's been a rocket ship, man. We have, I think, 22 people around the country working for us, with us. Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Chicago. I got 3 guys in Dallas. We have people in, of course, Scottsdale, Denver, San Diego. So, we're everywhere. I have a marketing team. I have a CFO. We have an accounting guy. We have admin. It's crazy what the things become. And I wake up some days like, oh my God, right? What's going on? It's pretty
Yeah.
cool. But once again, my back team is, I'm so proud of the fact that our back is as strong as our front. And usually firms are very good at sales and not good at the production, or they're great at production, not good at sales or marketing. Our team is we're very well rounded, and I think that's the key. We can perform. So when a claim comes in, we're as good as the back end we are the front end, and not many. And I'm saying in construction the same way. There's a lot of great guys that can sell these jobs, but most contractors can't perform. That's the problem, right? Or they don't know the business of construction. That's where most contractors fail. Was always my struggle, was the business side, because it's man, it changes by the second. I mean, you'd have $3 million in the bank one day and then 11 cents the next day, hoping to God, right? Hoping to God the next mailman comes. So it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's scary, it's exciting. When Ida hit, we were living in trailers for 2 months getting claims done, with no hot water, but we did it. And it can be exciting, exhilarating, and frustrating, infuriating all at the same time, the same day on the same claim. So it's all that stuff.
Well, I think you hit on the head, as a business owner, and this is just great perspective, counsels that, business, you have to understand to be a successful entrepreneur and business owner. I mean, it's a lot more fluid than rigid, right? I mean,
Hmm.
to be super rigid, you got to understand how the ebbs and flows of business and, the emotions of employees and clients, like how do you, massage this? And it's like to be super rigid, like it's typically not
Oh
a
man.
recipe for success. Yeah, you have to fight at it. But, for you, like the marketing side, because you've had this amazing growth, like, and maybe you can, you do a podcast, you're active on all these channels. I mean, being a thought leader in your industry from the public adjusting, I mean, probably the same question I get asked, why the podcast? Why put so much thought and information into your industry?
Here's the thing. So public adjusting is a fairly new business, and not many people know about us. So that's the biggest thing. And at the same time, people come into this thing thinking, if I just write a good scope of damage, send it in, it's gonna be boom, boom, boom. Well, that's about 1/30 of what we do. So I've kind of taken. I feel an obligation. I think because I'm getting old now, I feel an obligation to bring up our whole industry as a whole: public adjusters, roofers, contractors, restoration guys. I think I didn't feel this way 20 years ago or 10 years ago. I'm out for myself. I'm gonna do everything I can to make my company great and screw these other guys. Well, I've learned that's not the best way to do it. It's about the community as a whole, being a leader. And I speak at. Other PAs are some of my best friends. We talk all the time about stuff because there's very few of us that are doing it right. And I really feel a sense of obligation to make our business better every day. When I say our business, I mean the business of adjusting
The industry,
on
right?
both sides. Yeah, there's a lot of great adjusters on the other side, and there's a lot of poor adjusters. I mean, our job is to educate, 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 educate. And the more we educate and get people thinking about this stuff, the better we're all going to be. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, honestly, bringing claims in and making money in this business isn't the tough part. The tough part is the education and getting people to understand what's going on and bring them up to a different level and giving. I've learned in my my later years here, giving is a lot. You get back 10 times more than you give, right? And when we're all younger, I think taking is much simpler. But now, as the older I get, the more I give out back to the community, the more it comes back tenfold. I mean, that's why we have such a great staff, is because all these guys come to our training and we get to meet each other, and if they fit our mold, you almost know immediately they fit our mold. That's why we're growing so fast, because when you hit it off as a group, man, they fit in quickly, and there's not a lot of learning curve, and there's not a lot of molding or grooming. They take it and run, and it's been huge. A big part of our success is that too. It's one big. It just goes and it's one big world, right? It's how it goes. It's crazy. So it's hard to explain. Yeah.
No, you said it's funny because as you were speaking about that, Jack, I thought about an early mentor, and he made a comment, and I was just graduated from college. I think I was 24, and he said, Brad, the best lesson is generosity precedes prosperity, right? And
Yep.
to that point is that it's like as you're generous and you give back, and as you mentioned, I mean, it pays back tenfold. And you said this, yeah,
Oh,
your generosity is going to proceed. And what helps too is any successful company or CEO or executive, those that understand, as you mentioned earlier, the pain points, right? By knowing the role of each of as the batons pass through the company, if they understand that sales channel, that sales funnel, what the coordinator does, the project manager, the estimator, superintendent, if you understand that, and as you mentioned, you've been on both sides, you've been the restoration guy, you've been the public adjuster, you dealt with insurance, so you understand all the channels and funnels here. It just helps you bring that much more value to the industry because you get it, and you can be a liaison for all the components there.
one thing I have learned too the last couple of years has been I never thought I'd hear myself saying this. I used to think when I owned my own company that everyone needs to adapt to my thought and what I'm all about. Like
Yeah,
here's what we're doing, here's our agenda. You don't like it, you can get the hell out, right? Well, I've learned that that's not really the way to do things, right? And it took me a long time to I have to treat so like the guys who do the adjusters have a different mindset than the guys doing the marketing, and the marketing guys have a different mindset than the guys doing the documentation. And you treat them all great, but you treat them differently. Does that make sense?
it
And
does.
it took
Yeah,
me a hell of a long time. I used to think it's not a democracy, it's my way or the highway. Well, guess what? I can't do all the work myself. So I'm not to pat myself on the back, but I'm going to. I've learned the last few years, and I want to give my partner Doug a lot of credit for this, to show me the light on this. Like, dude, you got to adapt to what they need and fill the gaps in. That's why you're the leader, and this is your business. So our job is to fill the gaps in where the voids are, not the other way around. And man, if every business entrepreneur can see that earlier than later, that's going to help make them better. And we try to teach that as well. It's like, guys, my way or the highway don't work anymore. It's not like it's 1978 anymore. It's a different world, and I've learned that the hard way, unfortunately. But at the same time, now it's really been part of our success is learning how to help. Some people don't know how to ask for help, right? So you have to give them the help, give them what they need, not what they're asking for. Sometimes, right? It's been a hell of a ride. I'm not going to kid you. So.
well, you mentioned this. I mean, company culture is first and
Oh,
foremost, and it's just for those of us that have children, we communicate and with our children differently. Things motivate them differently, just like our employees, right? All of them have different values, and so
100%.
outside of that side, Jack, I mean, what do you do for fun outside of living in the trailer with no hot water for that job?
Well, the cool part about my job is we get to travel quite a bit, and I love traveling. I've been to Puerto Rico, and I'm going to Nashville next week, so I travel quite a bit. And when I'm out traveling for work, I love going to different restaurants and seeing the sights, having a good bottle of wine, playing a great round of golf at a cool golf course, and just meeting people all around the country. And it's my job has become it's a lot of fun, man. And I get to meet a lot of cool people, see a lot of cool spaces. So it's given me a world of opportunity, not just for work, but for my personal life as well. And I have 2 kids, and my daughter graduates next week from U of A. Thank God.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
my
awesome.
son
Congrats.
graduated last year, and he's learning the family business now. Begrudgingly, I didn't want to let him in, but he's doing great. So yeah, it's my family, my friends, and a good bottle of wine and traveling seems to be my little solace here. So.
That's amazing. Well, that's awesome. Well, what's upcoming and exciting for Velocity and you, Jack?
Whew, well, we have 2 huge trainings coming up in Nashville and Dallas. We train other public adjusters, so we have about 25 coming in Nashville. Probably have 30 to 40 coming in Dallas. We're actually just starting to hunker down again for the hurricane season coming up here this fall. It's supposed to be tremendous again. We've already started planning for that, which is mind-boggling since we're still doing other hurricane work. So we're actually doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And, every day we're just trying to do better, grow, and be a resource for, number one, our consumers and our clients and even our competitors, just to be a resource for everybody, really. So.
Well, I can tell you my first call is going to be to Jack. Anytime I go through that PA side, that public adjustment on the insurance claim. But, for those who want to know more, learn more, know where you're at, follow you, I mean, where can they find you, Jack?
Yeah, we're on Facebook. VPA is on Facebook. Our website, vpa.claims. I always give my cell phone number out, too. So it's 480-766-6565. I get calls 24/7. So, yeah, get a hold of us anywhere you can. Website, Facebook. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, the whole 9 yards. So, and our podcast, Because Experience Matters, is on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, everything. So, pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome, Jack. We'll make sure to get those in our show notes and for everyone, and when we tag you on social media. So again, thank you for making time and just sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today.
No, we appreciate it, man. Thank you for having us, man. Keep up the great work out there.
Likewise, Jack. Well, dude, that was like a phenomenal interview, Jack. Like, it was so good. You're so good.
I get pretty passionate about stuff, so.
I love that. I mean, I was super engaged just the whole time. I'm like, man, this is phenomenal. So great job. Super informative. You did well spoken. I'm going to send an email to Rachel just thanking her again for the intro.
Right,
so
cool. That's awesome.
And I'll get back to you, Jack. I think this comes out in 3 weeks. I think
Okay.
I'll confirm the date. And what I do is I'll tag you on social media. So on Sunday we do like our stories, and then Monday we do it in our feed on all of our channels, like press release. So
I'll send it out too. I got a bunch of followers on stuff, so we'll be sure we do that as well.
Cool.
Awesome, man.
Well, have a good one, Jack. Thanks for rescheduling, and you've been awesome.
Man.
You got it. Talk soon.
Buddy.